G'day legends, so in today we're going to be talking about Dillon Danis and how he wants to desperately get into the UFC, and how Dillon has wanted to get into the UFC for quite a while, but the UFC aren't letting him because, well, we'll get into that. First of all, let's listen to what Dillon Danis had to say after his recent win over at Misfits.
You mentioned Islam and Hamza.
Yes.
Obviously you want to fight both of them.
I will get that fight because the UFC right now is lacking stars, and I'm the only one you've seen this whole week sell this whole thing. I wanted to sell it more, but there were some things that went into it. The UFC wants to see me more tame, but you know, I'm the one. People enjoy what I'm doing. You know, in the fight, it's not just the fight; it's the whole package. It's the storyline. It's the build-up. And in the UFC, that's lacking. And these guys are boring as fuck. So I can go in there and I'll take on anybody first fight. Kevin Holland, if they want to give me a top 15, top 10. Top number 1, I don't care who it is, I'll beat them all.
Right, so there we go. Now, yes, Dillon Danis is a showman, okay, and he's a bit of a prick. I can freely admit that. But he's kicked off with saying it that he'll take someone outside of the rankings, he'll take someone lower down in the rankings, he'll take someone in the top 5, he'll take a number 1 contender shot, and obviously that's just Dillon Danis just trying to oversell this thing, but that is what Dillon Danis does, and that is sort of the problem that the UFC has with Dillon Danis. Like, in MMA, he's mid. I think he's absolutely mid. I think he would, and especially considering that he is unfortunately one of those guys that has talked about competing at 165. He's a mid-ranger, so he is in the hardest division in the UFC. He's in that gap right between lightweight and welterweight. And how does Dillon Danis go at welterweight? I mean, I think he gets absolutely destroyed by Sean Brady. Absolutely destroyed by Sean Brady. I think Ian Gary picks him apart at range. I think he would have to drop down to 155, and at 155 he could be competitive. It depends how the UFC wants to matchmake him. That's the whole thing with 155. Everyone there is a little bit mid right now except for Max Holloway, Ilya Topuria, Arman Sarukian. Everyone else is sort of, as you're looking down the rankings, you've still got your Dariushas, your Chandlers, your Renato Moicanos. People don't love Fiziev the way that I seem to love Fiziev. So it all depends on how you matchmake him if it was to be at lightweight. But he can't get into the UFC because the UFC bloody hate him. Now, you might not remember this because it was a while ago now. I'm starting to show my age. But it's because of what happened at UFC 229, where it was actually Dillon Danis that enraged Khabib so much after the fight. That is what caused Khabib to have the greatest crash out in UFC history and jump outside of the cage and actually attack Dillon Danis, the blonde muppet down there that was talking all that trash. That was Dillon Danis. And ever since then, Dana White has absolutely raged out at him. But the weird thing is, exceptions have been made for UFC 299. Like, Dana did everything that he possibly could to try and make a rematch happen between Khabib and Conor McGregor. Obviously, the two guys that were primarily involved in the scuffle that went on. So, Dana's principles, as we know, they do have a price connected to them. Yeah, there is a certain amount of money that you can pay Dana White, and his principles just go out the window. And what is also interesting about UFC 299 and Dillon Danis not being allowed into the UFC because of that, well, Islam Makhachev was at UFC 299. Islam Makhachev was one of the guys that jumped into the cage and punched Conor McGregor in the back of the head. And Dana White said, yeah, he's never ever going to fight in the UFC again. Have a look.
Guys that got in there, we believe we're on the roster. I mean, Islam Makhachev and Zubair Tukhugov. Would you take sanctions against him or Khabib?
Of course. The guys who jumped in will never fight here. They'll never fight here.
And lo and behold, as we know, not only is Islam Makhachev fighting in the UFC again, but Islam Makhachev has gone on to become the greatest lightweight of all time. And Islam Makhachev has been given the privilege that not a lot of UFC fighters get of being able to vacate his belt, which is, you know, just a new twist that the UFC are putting on it, but move up and actually fight and try and get a second belt. Generally, the UFC want you to stay wherever you are in your division, so that makes it a lot easier for the marketing. But no, Islam Makhachev's allowed to move up, and he absolutely deserves that. But it just goes to show that in two situations directly involved with UFC 299, Dana White is willing to forgive the people that were involved in it and bring them back into the UFC. So, as much as I am not a hardcore Dillon Danis fan, and as much as I don't think he would go deep in either division, lightweight or welterweight, I have said before that I think Muhammad Mokaev deserves to come back to the UFC, no matter how much trouble he caused down at the Apex. I don't really give a shit what these guys do behind closed doors. That's kind of your problem, Dana, and your security issues. So I guess this is where Dana is drawing the line. But Dillon Danis, yeah, he was involved in one little scuffle. He was just shit talking. Like, to be fair, it was Khabib was the one that jumped the cage and actually caused the violence. Khabib was the one that took it from just talking shit took it to throwing hands. Now, whether or not Dillon Danis deserves it, that's what I think he does, by the way. I think if you talk shit, you deserve to get hit. I think he deserves it. But when we're having this old morality conversation, Dillon Danis was just talking shit at the schoolyard playground, which is what we're meant to be doing in the UFC. And Khabib is the one that broke the rules of engagement. And now Dillon Danis is the one getting punished for it. To a point where we are now talking about this 6 years later. Dillon Danis has left Bellator. Dillon Danis has gone and done extra work in fun promotional leagues, which from Dillon Danis' point of view is the right thing to do. Like, do you really want to get locked into a bullshit PFL contract where nobody is watching those fights and you're not really making any money of yourself? You know, like Chael Sonnen always says, you want to take the easiest fight possible for the most amount of money. That's what Dillon Danis has been doing. Dillon Danis sold that Logan Paul fight absolutely perfectly. You know, he just went and found the dirt that was publicly available on Logan Paul's whore of a girlfriend and just went and shared it online. Date a whore. People are going to notice that you're dating a whore. These things are just out there for people to see. And now Dillon Danis has gone and won himself a MMA match in Misfits. Now, was the person he was fighting really an MMA fighter? No, he wasn't. But I'm sure he got paid more for that fight than the 5 fights he would have to do over at the PFL. Dillon's done everything he could. And he said that he could have gone a lot harder, which we know he could have gone a lot harder in promoting this Misfits fight, but he chose not to. He chose to tamper himself a bit because the UFC are literally asking him to tamper. He doesn't even work for the UFC. And he has still tampered himself to try and do the right thing to get into the UFC. So, Dana, how long are you going to hold this grudge for 10 years because Khabib crashed out against Dillon? I wouldn't mind seeing him versus Colby Covington talk shit. I would love to see how Dillon Danis would react with Ian Machado, Gary in the mix. I think that would be fucking hilarious to see. So I want to see some of those. Whether or not the fights would be that exciting, I'm still a fan of the shit talking, and I'd like to see that shit talking. So we get Dillon Danis into the UFC. Next thing that I wanted to talk about was Aljamain Sterling. He was recently just doing a podcast with Chompers down at Full Send. He was doing a podcast with Chompers down at Full Send, and he shared that, you know, the new Sean O'Malley reached out to him and just said, well done for the fight. Check it out.
O'Malley sent me a message.
Oh, yeah.
Let me read it. This is what he wrote me.
Holy shit, you look good. Nasty job. Creative. Strong, beautiful performance. Wow.
I just liked it.
Aljo just likes it. You're an asshole.
I was like, I don't
Nicest message. Aljo just double taps.
What am I supposed to say? Like,
Bro, like,
Thanks, bro.
I should have said, take my fucking picture off the wall. His podcast. He's got my head on his.
And this is really nice from Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley's had a real breakthrough moment. You know, Merab humbled him. Truly, Merab humbled him. Sean O'Malley said after that fight he was looking at Cody Garbrandt and all the tattoos over his face, and he realized how much of an absolute wank Cody Garbrandt looked like, and then he thought, oh my God, that's how people look at me. And since then, since the Merab humbling, you know, Sean O'Malley's gone out and he's talked about how he regrets some of the life choices that he's made with his wife and how he got sucked into being the next Conor McGregor a little bit too much. And, you know, we haven't seen the colors all wash through his hair. You know, he's actually growing up, and he reached out to Aljamain Sterling and he said, you looked phenomenal in that fight. And Aljamain Sterling pulled a Kevin Holland on him. Now I'm in my ego. What am I meant to say, dude? What am I meant to say? He said, good job. I look fantastic. He said, well done. Fuck that guy. What am I meant to say? You could have said thanks. You could have tried to bury the hatchet. Could have said thanks. And Aljamain's like, well, why don't you take down the photo of me that's in your office? It's, dude, you are unfortunately on the receiving end of the punch that made Sean O'Malley a UFC world champion, which is very hard to anyone to ever achieve and will be almost impossible for him to achieve again. It's not because he's hitting you. Yeah, I understand you're the guy getting hit, but can you not understand that maybe if you're going to have a podcast and you have a platform to grow off, like becoming a UFC champion, you might have a photo that encapsulates that moment in the podcast. Could you understand that line of reasoning? And the fact that it is your face on the end of that punch just happens to be a matter of happenstance. But this is a sport. There is no malice meant by it. Sean O'Malley is merely pointing out the moment that made him a champion. And let's face it, Aljamain, it was a pretty fucking cool morning. A pretty cool moment, right? Pretty fucking cool moment. And you are so butthurt over it still, 3 years later, that your rival comes and sends you a truly nice, heartwarming message after your best friend humbled him. The level of man that it takes to be able to step up like that and be like, your best friend absolutely fucking bitched me twice in front of the world, and your last fight you dominated. Well done, mate. And you can't even send him a thank you. Now you're in your ego. That's a real 45-70 move from Aljamain Sterling there. It is, dude. That irked me, man. That irked the fuck out of me. Like, that is such a nice moment of Sean. Just say thanks, bro. That's what you could have said, Aljamain. Just say thanks, bro. Anyway, that's it. If this is your first time here, g'day, welcome. My name is Dougie. I make an MMA video every single day of the week. I'm traveling right now, so the quality might be a little bit down, but I'll be back soon, and the quality will be right back up to the usual standards. If you enjoyed this video, if you want to know when I go live, I try and go live as often as possible. Hit the notification bell down there so you know when a new video drops and you know when I go live. Leave a comment down there. Who would you like to see Dillon Danis match made with in the UFC? Interesting question, I know. Like the video if you like the video, and until then, I'll see you guys all in the next one. Have a good one. Goodbye.